U.S. too often pushes Ukraine, not Russia, for concessions. Zelensky. France assembles magistrate team to examine Epstein files. At least 6,000 killed over 3 days during RSF attack on Sudan's El Fasher, UN says. Iran, Russia, China hold trilateral talks in Vienna. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is hopeful that U.S.-brokered peace talks with Russia scheduled for next week will be meaningful, but he warned that Ukraine is being asked too often to make concessions. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Zelensky stressed the need for clear security guarantees, saying lasting peace cannot be achieved without a strong and reliable defense framework. Ukraine and Russia have already held 2 rounds of U.S.-mediated talks in Abu Dhabi. While both sides described the discussions as constructive, no major breakthroughs were reached. A new round of trilateral negotiations is set to take place in Geneva. Zelensky said he expects the upcoming talks to be serious and productive, but noted that the parties sometimes appear to be discussing entirely different issues. He also criticized the repeated focus on Ukrainian concessions, rather than reciprocal steps from Russia. The Ukrainian leader called it a mistake that European nations are largely absent from the negotiating table, arguing their involvement could improve the chances of ending the war. One of the most disputed points remains Russia's demand that Ukrainian forces fully withdraw from the parts of the Donetsk region still under Kyiv's control. Ukraine has rejected a unilateral withdrawal and continues to insist on Western security guarantees to prevent future aggression. Zelensky reiterated a central message: without a clear security system, any peace agreement risks being short-lived. French prosecutors have formed a special team of magistrates to examine evidence that could link French nationals to crimes committed by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The unit will review existing materials and identify any evidence that could support new investigations. Officials say the team will work closely with police and financial crime prosecutors. One case set for renewed scrutiny is that of Jean-Luc Brunel, a modeling agency executive and longtime associate of Epstein. Brunel was found dead in a Paris prison in 2022 while awaiting trial on charges including the rape of minors and sexual harassment. He had been accused of recruiting and transporting young women for Epstein across several countries. The case was dropped after his death, and no additional suspects were charged. Prosecutors are also reviewing newly released U.S. documents that mention several French public figures. Investigations are underway into senior diplomat Fabrice Aydin, while separate complaints have been filed against model recruiter Daniel Siad and conductor Frédéric Chasselin over alleged sexual offenses. In addition, a preliminary financial crimes probe has been opened into former culture minister Jack Lang and his daughter over suspected money laundering tied to tax fraud. Lang recently resigned from a prominent cultural institution in Paris. Authorities emphasize that being named in the so-called Epstein files does not automatically imply wrongdoing, and investigations remain ongoing. The United Nations says more than 6,000 people were killed during a 3-day assault on the Darfur city of El Fasher by Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. In a newly released report, the UN Human Rights Office described the attack as shocking in its scale and brutality, citing widespread executions, sexual violence, abductions, torture, and enforced disappearances, acts that may constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. RSF fighters and allied militias captured the city on October 26 after an 18-month siege. At least 400 people were killed inside El Fasher, while more than 600 died attempting to flee. Investigators warn the true death toll is likely far higher. Among the dead were roughly 500 civilians sheltering in a university dormitory that came under heavy fire, and about 600 others, including dozens of children who were reportedly executed at university facilities. The report also details other deadly incidents, including an attack on a maternity hospital that killed at least 460 people, and shelling of a camp for displaced civilians that left around 300 dead. Sexual violence was described as widespread, with women and girls from non-Arab communities deliberately targeted. Survivors told investigators that rape was systematically used as a weapon of war. Thousands were reportedly abducted and held in RSF-run detention sites, including a children's hospital converted into a prison, with many still missing. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has called for accountability, warning that continued impunity could fuel further violence in Sudan's conflict, a war that began in April 2023 and has since created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Diplomatic representatives from Iran, Russia, and China have held another round of trilateral consultations in Vienna to discuss developments related to Iran's nuclear program. The meeting took place at the level of the three countries, permanent missions to international organizations in the Austrian capital, reflecting ongoing coordination within multilateral frameworks. According to Russia's permanent representative to international organizations in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, the talks focused on key issues surrounding Iran's nuclear file as the three nations continue their diplomatic engagement. The consultations highlight continued cooperation among Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing on one of the most closely watched security matters in global diplomacy.